It's time for health, your super informative turmeric latte charged, ginseng powered, antioxidant rich natural health podcast with a little twist of lemon. And I'm your host, Greg Newson, naturopath, herbalist, and nutritionist. We're here today for the Vitality and Wellness Centre and sponsored by NatraVital Health Supplements. 100% pure active ingredients, no binders, fillers, or additives. G'day and welcome to the latest episode from Time for Health. In today's episode, we're not actually going to look at a health condition or how a specific part of the body works. We're actually going to look at fluoride. Now, we're going to look at fluoride, what it is, the perceived health benefits, and the perceived side effects. Now, we're not going to look at this through the eyes of the Dental Association or the water authorities or the local governments or the federal governments or through the eyes of the so-called conspiracy theorists. What we're going to do is look at the scientific studies. We're going to see what the science says, what the studies have said about fluoride, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, sit back, relax, and listen to learn something new. Fluoride is estimated to be the 13th most abundant mineral in the Earth's crust. Over millions of years, the fluoride that is contained in the rocks and in the Earth's crust breaks down and then naturally occurs in our waterways, and that can be uptaken if we drink out of those waterways, and it can be uptaken by plants, fruits, vegetables, etc. By far the most common way that we're exposed to fluoride is through our drinking water, whether if your water is naturally high in fluoride or if it's not, then a synthetic or an artificial fluoride is then introduced into our waters. And there are generally three types of fluoride that is introduced into the water in toothpaste and mouthwashes. They are sodium fluoride, hydrofluorosilicic acid, and sodium silicofluoride. Now, sodium silicofluoride is naturally found in volcanoes. So when the volcano erupts, there's a lot of that fluoride that comes out into the environment and then settles on the earth. As you can imagine, not very easy to mine that form of fluoride. So when that is put into our water, it is put in as a synthetic form. All three forms of fluoride that I've just mentioned, if you go look at their health and safety data, they all have danger written on them, and they all have the skull and crossbones, which means not to be touched by human hands or breathed in or inhaled by humans or lungs, because it'll corrode. It's very corrosive, so it can dissolve your skin, can dissolve concrete, it can dissolve bitumen. So hands off. Lots of gloves and protective gear. So water fluoridation is not as common as I believed it was. I believed that pretty much the whole world had fluoridated water or put fluoride in their water. But a quick search in Wikipedia and water fluoridation by country shows that's not 100% correct. According to Wikipedia, about 372 million people, or 5.7% of the world population, receives artificially fluoridated water. So in my country, Australia, it's over 80% of the country, and in some states it's over 90% of the drinking water is fluoridated. A neighbour across the ditch, New Zealand's around 70%. America is close to 70% of their total water is fluoridated. Canada is close to 50%, while the UK drops down to around 14%. In Ireland and Singapore, it's mandatory to have your water fluoridated. But a lot of other countries, European countries, whether it be Sweden, Denmark, Italy, or Japan, or Korea, Malaysia, or Vietnam, they don't actually have fluoridated water. There's either it's been rejected and we're not doing it, or there's naturally occurring fluoride that I've mentioned from the Earth's crust that's in the water, and when they would then put additional synthetic fluoride in the water, that would drive the fluoride levels up too much. So some countries rejected it outright, other countries have naturally occurring fluoride in their water, and one of those countries that experienced putting too much fluoride in the water was China, and because they had naturally occurring fluoride, and once they put the additional fluoride into the water, they suffered there was a lot of people that suffered a thing called skeletal fluoridosis, which means that fluoride gets into the bones and the bones become brittle, breaks, and then there's a lot of pain associated with the fluoridosis, skeletal fluoridosis. So we all have been told that fluoride is really good to prevent tooth decay. That's the number one thing. The dental associations recommend it, the governments push it, the health bureaucrats push it, the local water suppliers push it, Colgate pushes it. So I thought that's a good place to start. We're going to look at, we've been told how good it is for our teeth, so let's look at the facts. Let's look at the studies. Now, in that Wikipedia article, I was glancing through that, and it did say that a Cochrane review estimates that a reduction in cavities when water fluoridation is used by children. They had no other access to other sources of fluoride. There was a reduction of cavities in the teeth by 35% in baby teeth and 26% in permanent teeth. And I went, well, that's pretty good. That sounds like it's doing some sort of reasonable job. So I thought I'd have a look at this Cochrane review. People that don't know what a Cochrane review is, I will read out from PubMed, which is a big database of all scientific studies, and they say that systemic reviews carried out by Cochrane collaboration are recognised worldwide as the highest standard in evidence-based healthcare. The main reason is that the Cochrane reviews follow a common and specific methodology to limit bias and random error. So, in other words, they're the duck's nuts. Out of all the scientific studies that you can get, the Cochrane review is the best. So, let's have a look at this Cochrane review on water fluoridation. Now, anything that I mentioned, any studies that I've mentioned, they will be available for you to have a look at. Just go to vitalityandwellness.com.au, click on podcasts and find this podcast on fluoridation, and I will list all of the scientific studies so you can go have a look at them yourself. You can make your own decision. Don't take my word for it. Be your own detective. So the Cochrane review is called Water Fluoridation for the Prevention of Dental Caries, which is basically tooth decay. So they found 155 studies dating back from 1946 to 2015 when this review was published. Out of those 155 studies, they had to find studies that had compared two portions of the population, one receiving fluoridated water and one not receiving fluoridated water. So out of those 155 studies, they whittled it down to 107. So they had 107 studies that provided the specific data or the sufficient data for their review. So in this studies, in their results, they did say that there is a 35% reduction in the dental cavities and teeth removals in baby teeth in children, and a 26% reduction in the child's adult teeth. They also go on to say that the majority of these studies were conducted prior to 1975 and the widespread introduction of fluoride into toothpaste. They also say that there is insufficient information to determine whether the initiation of water fluoridation programs resulted in a change in dental cavities across a socioeconomic status, and that there is insufficient information to determine the effect of stopping water fluoridation on the dental cavities. Now, there's another thing called dental fluoridosis, so that's the mottling of the teeth. So it means the fluoride gets into the teeth and displaces things like calcium and other minerals. So your bone mineral, your dental minerals in your teeth become a bit weak and a bit softer. And they found that if the water fluoride levels was 0.7 parts per million, that approximately 12% of the population suffered from dental fluoridosis. If the levels were above 0.7 parts per million, and they looked at all the range of the fluoride throughout the whole studies, the dental fluoridosis went up to 40%. But what I find quite concerning actually is the authors' conclusions. So they've just gone through 107 scientific studies and they're now concluding that there is very little contemporary evidence meeting the review's inclusion criteria that has elevated the effectiveness of water fluoridation for the prevention of dental cavities. It's like, what? So all the scientific studies that we've been told follow the science and the it prevents fluoride in the water, prevents dental cavities. There's 107 scientific studies from the Cochrane review, which is the best and most accurate reviews in the world, and they're telling me that there's little effectiveness for fluoridation in the prevention of dental cavities. What the... there's a swear word involved there, but it better not come out because this is a children's program, but fair income. Boy, oh boy. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, most of the studies come from prior to 1975 and prior to the fluoride in the toothpaste. Now, let's say the fluoride in the toothpaste and the mouthwash has some benefits. It strengthens the enamel. Drink a glass of water. Go get a glass of water now and drink it. And tell me how many teeth the water hits. Not many. Maybe one if you're lucky, or two. So it just goes down the back of the throat. So the fluoride bypasses the teeth. It doesn't do anything when it's in the bloodstream. It does it on contact. What the author says is that our confidence in the size of the effect estimates is limited by the observational nature of the study's designs, the high-risk bias of the studies. So the studies that we're told are good for the teeth have a lot of bias to them. Okay, righto. So when we look at it, our diets have improved. Look, when I was a kid, we never thought about never thought about brushing our teeth, even though we're told to every night. You know, mum and dad say, "Have you brushed your teeth?" Yeah, brush your teeth, and you're chewing on a lolly and you go into bed. Or they'd get a bit wise to that and they'd say, "Come here and let me smell your breath." And then all of us boys, I've got 4 brothers, we all got wise to that too. We get a bit of toothpaste, put it on our tongue, move it around in our mouth and go, and mum and dad will go, "Oh yeah, that's good. You've brushed your teeth off, you go to bed," and we hadn't even touched them. Right? So we never had dental floss, don't even know what that was until later in life. So as a child, we didn't care about our teeth. Lollies and snacks and all that were a lot better. As the years have progressed, our dental hygiene has improved dramatically. Our diets have improved dramatically. Okay, back to I've just read this and I'm mulling on it because I get a little bit annoyed about what I'm about to read. Okay, let me read it to you. In the Cochrane review, there is a sentence in the author's conclusions towards the bottom. It said, "We did not identify any evidence meeting the review's inclusions criteria to determine the effectiveness of water fluoridation for preventing cavities in adults." Seriously, you're kidding me. I feel like I've been lied to my whole life. I'm just absolutely disgusted in what I have read right now. It is. I don't know. I don't know whether it's, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. If you ask my wife, loss for words is not one of my strong points. Now, this review is on our website. The link will be there. Read it. Go down to the author's conclusions. Go down and have a look at the main results. There's some technical sort of stuff there. When they 95%, 11%, 10 studies, 399,000 participants and all that. But it's broken down quite simply in the author's conclusions. Okay, so let me see. Let's look at this another way. So I've mentioned that these countries like Australia and America and New Zealand and Canada and Singapore and Ireland all have a lot of water fluoridation. Let's look at the countries that I've mentioned, say Japan, Denmark, whoever, that don't have high levels of, or they don't add fluoride to the water. Let's look and see if we can find some information on the cavities that they have. Thankfully, there has been data kept by the Malmo University in Sweden. They looked at the oral health of the country per area. So we just had a look at that Cochrane review, and they spoke about children with baby teeth and adult teeth with cavities. So I'm going to look at 12-year-old children across a couple of countries that don't fluoridate their water. And we're going to have a look and see where their dental cavities are. So if we look at Japan, in 1975, there was 5.9 cavities per child. In 2015, there is 0.9 cavities per child. Japan does not fluoridate their water. Italy, in 1975, had 6.9 cavities per 12-year-old child, and 2015, 1.1. Iceland in 1969 had 6.6 cavities per 12-year-old child, and in 1996, 1.5 cavities per child. Let's go for a random one here. Cuba in 1973 had 6 cavities per child. 2005, 1.5 cavities per child. Denmark, it's given us the longest study through the amount of years. So its study is from 1972 to 2019. In 1972, 5.2 cavities per child. In 2019, 0.3 cavities per child. Now, these people, or these countries, they don't fluoridate their water. They don't add synthetic fluorides to their water. But their dental cavities have gone down, just like they've gone down in Australia, just like they've gone down in America, just like they've gone down in New Zealand, Canada, wherever else, other countries that have added fluoride to their water. So my question is, why are we adding fluoride to the water? If our dental hygiene has improved that dramatically over the years, why do we need a synthetic chemical that has the skull and crossbones? Why are we ingesting it? We know that it doesn't touch our teeth. It's a simple thing. I'm going to have a drink of water right now. And you most probably heard that go down. And it might have touched a couple of teeth, but it didn't touch many teeth. So, okay, righto. Just as a side issue, Australia in 1977 had 4.8 dental cavities per 12-year-old child, and then in 2009 that figure had dropped down to 1.1. So it's really no different to any of the other countries that had non-fluoridated water. Fair dinkum. Let's look at the Tin Hat Brigade. Let's look at the conspiracy theorists. Let's see if some of the information that they are telling us of side effects of fluoride can actually be validated and be true. Okay, so I've had enough of that. I'm just allowing you to digest what I've just spoken about. Go read the studies. Go have a look at the Malmo University. Links on the website, on this podcast. And check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. With anything, do your own research. You're all told XYZ is good for you. It may not be good for you. Do your own research, make your own decisions. Okay, let's look at some of the studies that talk about the side effects of the fluoride in our drinking water, in particular silicofluoride, which is the most common fluoride. It's what we would put into the water that treats Sydney, the Warragamba Dam, the water supply that treats Sydney. And I know in America it's the more common one that is used also. So there is some studies that show a bit of concern in regards to that type of fluoride, that it increases the amounts of lead in the blood. Now, lead, as we know, is a major neurotoxin. It's one of the most toxic substances known to man. That's why it was banned in petrol and paint. So let's dive into some of these studies. So there's a study done, it looked at the blood of 280,000 children in Massachusetts that indicates that the silicofluoride usage is associated with a significant increase in average lead in children's blood, as well as a percentage of the children with blood lead in excess of 10 micrograms per deciliter. That is huge, huge. Now, before I go on with that, there's another study that looked at 151,225 blood samples from children aged 0 to 6 in the New York State area over 105 different communities. And they found that for every age and race group, there was a consistently significant association of silicofluoride treated community water and elevated blood lead levels. That is, again, massive. That 151,280, that's 431,000 tests that have shown a significant amount of elevated lead in the blood of people that drink fluoridated water. I mean, hello. Not only did I just have the Cochrane review that said that fluoridation doesn't do anything, I'm now getting a couple of tests here of 400 odd thousand people that show that there's elevated blood. Lead was banned for the use in paint and banned for the use in cars because it was a major neurotoxin. It lowered the IQ of children, of adults. It is a major cause of ADHD. It is directly associated with a lot of neurological disorders, including anxiety, panic, depression, get that word out, depression. Hello, is anyone out there? These are quite common conditions in society. Poor concentration, poor learning, difficulty concentrating. They're all associated with lead. Now, seriously? I'm starting to go, Greg's putting his tin hat on his head. Fair income. Moving on. Okay, I'm going to see if we can find any other studies that show some adverse effects from fluoridated water, but fair income, I really don't need to go past lead to know that that is not good for us. Lead, as I've mentioned, it's one of the most toxic substances known to man. I think on the American toxicology report stuff that it is number 2 behind arsenic. Now, interestingly about lead, when you're exposed to lead, it goes into your bloodstream, as you can imagine, but it doesn't hang around in your bloodstream. It actually goes to cells or organs that have an affinity with lead. And when I say an affinity with lead, lead has a unique ability to displace calcium, chromium, cobalt, iron, manganese, molybdenum, potassium, selenium, sodium, and strontium from their resting places within the body. For example, calcium in the bones. So lead will replace calcium in the bones. Now, if it does that, that can then lead to, over time, obviously things like skeletal fluorosis, osteoporosis, and osteopenia. Now, not necessarily a calcium deficiency. Now, it is a calcium deficiency, but you're eating a lot of calcium, it's just not getting into the bones, or the chromium's not getting into the pancreas or wherever it needs to go, or the cobalt's not there to make B12, because cobalt's the mineral that's inside the B12 molecule. But you can get a hair mineral analysis, a test to check the heavy metals in your hair, but that's only checking what's floating around in the bloodstream at a given time, so over a 2 or 3 month period as your hair grows. Let me explain how a hair mineral analysis works. When the body is exposed to heavy metals, or it naturally consumes foods high in minerals such as magnesium, calcium, iron or potassium, those minerals and those heavy metals pass through the bloodstream. As they're going through the bloodstream, they travel through circulation, they pass through the scalp and through what we call keratin cells that make up our hair. Now, these keratin cells are really porous, and they have a great ability to trap minerals such as the magnesium, the calcium, and also the heavy metals. So as the hair grows, it comes out of the scalp, it becomes hard. Those minerals, or what's been happening over that last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, is trapped inside that hair. And then when we take a sample of the hair close to the scalp, sent to the laboratory, they analyse it for the composition of the minerals and the heavy metals. Now, we might find on a hair mineral analysis, if you've had recent exposure to lead, that your lead levels are quite high, or the same with mercury or arsenic. You also might find that there's low levels of zinc or sodium or iodine, which means your diet is deficient or you've got malabsorption issues. You might also find very high levels of minerals such as calcium, manganese, chromium, iron. Now that can indicate what we would call hidden heavy metal toxicity, and in this case, hidden lead toxicity. So what happens is there's organs and cells in the body that those minerals need to go to, and if we look at calcium, we will just focus on the bones. So calcium's meant to go to the bones, and the lead is already there. It's sitting in the bones, and calcium comes along and the lead says, bugger off, you're not coming in. And it's got a big padlock on the cell and it won't let calcium in. So the calcium floats around in the bloodstream. When we look at a hair mineral analysis, we see that elevated. But if we see it elevated by itself, we might be going, you might be having a lot of calcium. You could have parathyroid problem. Or if we see it elevated with the iron and the chromium and the manganese, we would be going, okay, you've got hidden lead, which means you haven't had recent exposure, or you've got low levels of exposure, but it's going into cells. It's causing problems in the long term or over the long term. So very important. Now, if you're taking fluoridated water and you're slowly getting a bit of lead retention day in, day out, What long-term health problems is that going to cause? Do you suffer anxiety? Do you suffer panic, depression? Does your child have learning disorders? Do you have learning disorders? Does your child have a lower IQ? Does poor concentration? Do they suffer ADHD? Do you suffer ADHD? I'm now starting to ask the questions. I'm starting to think what else is going on. Okay, let's see what other studies we can come up with. Looking into the brain, there was no human studies that showed any ill effects from fluoride. That being said, there is quite a lot of animal studies, in particular mice and rats, that showed that fluoride damaged brain tissue or destroyed brain cells, and it caused them to die, a thing called apoptosis. Now, the reason I suppose there was no studies into humans is because, unfortunately, the poor rats, after their study, they were euthanized, and then their brains cut up and dissected and analysed for tissue compared to the control group. So they'd have a control group of healthy rats and they wouldn't do anything to them, and then they'd have a group where they fed them fluoride, and then they'd compare both. Not really ethical to do that in humans, so we just have to rely on the animal studies. But then again, those animal studies aren't human studies, but animal studies are the next step. Basically, you go test tube studies, then animal studies, then human studies. And generally, not all the time, what we find in animals, we find a crossover in humans. That being said, it might not happen in this case with fluoride because I've got no definitive information. In the brain, there is a gland called the pineal gland. It sits right between the eyes on the bridge of the nose up there. It's where your third eye is, your third eye chakra. And the role of the pineal gland is to regulate our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle, our energy, etc. Now, when it gets dark, the pineal gland, so when we go to bed and it's dark at night, the pineal gland secretes melatonin. Melatonin secretes into the blood, and melatonin makes us go to sleep. When it gets light, when the sun rises in the morning, some bugger turns a light on in the middle of the night, our pineal gland switches off, our melatonin in the blood decreases, and then we wake up. Okay? Now, for this, there was a human study, even though the humans were dead. They got 11 aged cadavers, so dead bodies, and they dissected the pineal gland, and they found that the pineal gland has high amounts of fluoride. And animal studies have shown that the fluoride inhibits the release of melatonin. So sleep disorders is one common thing from melatonin deficiency, but melatonin is also a major antioxidant. Melatonin actually has been shown beneficial for cancer because it helps improve immune function as well, but mainly it's known for as a sleep molecule. When fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland, other minerals accumulate also, in particular calcium. Now, calcium causes, along with the fluoride and the other minerals, hardening of that pineal gland. So when you're a kid, or when people were younger, their sleep was never an issue. They quite easily fall asleep and stay asleep and go to bed at 7 o'clock and then wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to school. But as people age, and especially the elderly people, they seem to go to bed at 9 o'clock, and then they're awake at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and that's it. They don't get any more sleep, or they go to bed late at 12 o'clock, and then they're awake at 4 o'clock. So they're getting 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. That's because the pineal gland itself is not producing adequate amounts of melatonin, because the gland, anything in the body needs to be flexible. So if your arteries harden, there's a build-up of calcium in your arteries. It's a condition called atherosclerosis. The blood vessels themselves don't flex. They don't move. So when the heart pumps, the blood vessels don't, contract and relax when the blood's passing through them. They become more rigid. That's obviously heart disease. It elevates your blood pressure. It's a quite serious condition. Same thing with the pineal gland, that if it doesn't flex, the body's ability for the melatonin and other nutrients in that pineal gland to move around freely are diminished. Once that happens, you don't produce as much melatonin. Now, if we look at fluoride, you've been drinking tap water since you were a kid, you're now 60 or 70 years old, it accumulates. All right, I'll talk about what we can do to get rid of that in a little later. So the pineal gland, very important for sleep. Sleep, very important for long-term health and vitality and energy and immune function and inflammation reduction, and the list goes on and on and on. We need to sleep to regenerate and rest. While we're still on the brain, there is again animal studies, so I haven't found any human studies, but I just thought I'd mention some animal studies that show fluoride enhances the absorption of aluminium. And aluminium, we know, is a neurotoxin and is heavily linked to dementia, especially Alzheimer's. Now that worries me a little bit, because if you drink a soft drink or soda or alcohol, beer out of an aluminium can and the water's been fluoridated, yeah, we got a problem. So again, animal studies. So I haven't found any correlations in humans, but again, it's not ethically to bump off a human and then dissect the brain to see the results of fluoride and aluminium on the brain. So we've just got to rely on the animal studies, but as I say, they're not human studies. Moving away from the brain, there is some conflicting studies on cancer. So there is an age-related specific fluoride exposure in drinking water to bone cancer. A study from 2006 found an association between fluoride exposure in drinking water during childhood and the incidence of bone cancer among males, but not females. But the study then went on to say that further research is required. Then other studies have said that there is no real link between bone cancer and fluoride in the drinking water. So I'm sitting on the fence on that one. I just don't know. What I do know is that there is numerous animal studies that show that sodium fluoride, which is another type of fluoride that's added to the water, is linked to a lot of cell mutation and chromosomal changes. Now, these changes, these alterations of our DNA, our RNA, can trick the body into not knowing what's going on, and these cells then mutate. As you get one cell that mutate, that affects the cell next to it, and then affects the cell next to that, and so on and so on. It's like when you drop an apple, it gets a bruise. That bruise eventually takes over the whole apple if you leave it. That's what those mutating cells can do, and they can cause cancer. That part we know. But again, all this is animal studies. Dental fluoridosis is quite common. It's what, according to the Cochrane review, was I think 12.5% of people that had 0.7 parts per million of fluoride in their water suffered from dental fluoridosis, which is the hypomineralisation, so the lack of minerals in the teeth. So obviously you think calcium for the teeth, so there's a lack of calcium. It's been replaced by fluoride, and that then causes that white mottling in mild fluoridosis to brown and dark brown in severe fluoridosis. An interesting study I've come across is one that links fluoride to Down syndrome births. One of the major contributing factors to a Down syndrome birth is an ageing mother. Now, in this study, which I'll read from the text, it also appears that the daily dose line of Down syndrome birth rates for daily fluoride intake may have no allowable level that does not induce fluoride-linked Down syndrome births. Therefore, fluoride may be one of the major causes of Down syndromes other than that of an ageing mother. Wow. Okay. It's one of a study that I've found. There's not lots of them. I feel there should be a few more of them. I think this needs to be investigated a lot more. This study was from 2009. And if that's true, that's huge. It doesn't mean every mother that drinks fluoridated water, his child is going to have Down syndrome. But if we know that Down syndrome is an abnormality of the chromosomes, and we know from animal studies that fluoride induces chromosomal changes, so I wouldn't put this out of the realms of possibility. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just reading as it is. And I'm just providing the information for you guys to make your own informed choices. There are quite a few studies that show that fluoride crosses the placental barrier and does affect the developing fetus, but again, they are in animals. An interesting study showed that fluoride inhibited the sodium iodine co-transporter, which most probably means nothing to anybody except nerds like me. The sodium iodine co-transporter is found in the follicular cells, which are all the cells that make up the thyroid, so the endothelial cells that make up the thyroid. Now, if fluoride blocks the iodine's ability to pass through those co-transporters into the thyroid, we've got problems. We've got serious problems, really, because iodine is required to make thyroxines. Thyroxine is your body's thyroid hormone, commonly known as T3. People that don't produce enough thyroxine then have to go into medication, and there could be the medication called oroxin or levothyroxine. There's quite a lot of different ones. Could it be that the thyroid is lacking iodine, which makes the thyroxine, due to the water they drink? Well, some studies have shown that fluoride will cause goiter, which is an enlargement of the thyroid gland, and hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid. Classic signs of an underactive thyroid include feeling tired, gaining weight, feeling cold, aches and pains in your muscles and your joints. The old hair loss, that thing can just related as for some blokes for going old, or growing old, I should say. The skin can become dry, it can become itchy, you can feel down, depressed. You have trouble concentrating, remembering, your bowels mightn't work as properly as they should, you can be constipated. For a woman, the periods could be quite irregular or heavy. There has been several animal studies that show that fluoride can damage the kidneys and impede its ability to filter fluids and toxins effectively. Animal studies also show that fluoride upsets the gastrointestinal tract, so it can cause pain or damage to the gut. It also diminishes the reproductive health of both males and females. A bait in rats, but nevertheless, still males and females. Even though these studies show that fluoride can cause damage or harm, they're in animals, so we can't really say that the same thing's going to happen in humans. It may, but we've got no proof, so I'm not going to go make any wild claims or accusations. There is another lot of animal studies that show that a condition called oxidative stress is quite common in fluoride exposure. Now, what oxidative stress is think of it this way. When steel rusts, that's oxidative stress, so it damages. So in the body, that oxidative stress would damage cells, would damage genes, chromosomes, the RNA, the DNA of the cells, which we've discussed a little bit earlier. Antioxidants are things, ingredients or chemicals found in foods that protect cells from damage. So good antioxidants is anything that's purple, any fruit, vegetable, or any food found naturally in nature. Whereas I can't say from many of the studies that drinking water will cause any particular condition, except for the retention of lead. That was the big one, because that was 400 and something thousand people or children that were tested, and that showed across a broad range of people that there was elevation of lead, and we know that elevation of lead is toxic and can cause a lot of neurological problems. A lot of the other studies that they had that I've read, they've given people higher amounts or given animals higher amounts of fluoride than what you would see in our water. So if you look at that on the surface level, you go, well, they've given them too much in that study, and that can't really indicate what the drinking water does. I kind of think of that is correct, but it's also incorrect, because they might have only given the rats or the mice or the other animals high doses for their body weight for a short period of time. But if you've started life drinking water at age, 0, and then you're still drinking the water in your 50s and your 60s and your 70s and your 80s, you've got to have an accumulation. We know it accumulates in the pituitary gland. We knew that from when they dissected the pituitary gland of people that had died. We also know that from animal studies as well. We know that it accumulates in the teeth from fluoridosis. We know that it accumulates in the skeleton from skeletal fluoridosis. So why would it not accumulate anywhere else? We know that it blocks the thyroid or the iodine from getting across the co-transporters. We know that it affects the thyroid. To me, it seems like that fluoride, even in small doses, can have long-term health problems, especially, we've got so many health conditions that we don't know where they've come from, whether it be autoimmune disease, obviously cancer, depression, anxiety, panic. And if we're putting a man-made chemical, so we're not putting the natural fluoride into the water, the fluoride that's found in the Earth's crust, but a synthetic form of that, and we're putting that into our water supply in low doses, and we're drinking it daily, surely that has to have an effect. Now, I know that governments and health bureaucrats will tell us, no, but I don't believe anything they say anymore. I've just lived through COVID and my bullshit radar is quite well attuned now. So my recommendation is remove the fluoride from your diet. Just take it out. Now, the way to take it out, if you live in town water and they fluoridate your water, you're going to have to buy a filter that can remove fluoride from the water. And fluoride, you get a lot of filters that you put on your bench top and you turn your tap on and water comes out. Those filters are good at filtering out bacteria and toxins, or not toxins, but impurities, including chlorine. Fluoride, it takes longer to filter. So a lot of people will use a water jug, so a big ceramic jug, and there's a special, I know Dalton make it, a special filter there that slowly filters the water through the filter and removes the fluoride. I think it only removes it about a litre a minute. Now, there is other things like reverse osmosis and other filters that will remove fluoride also, but you're just going to have to do your homework on that sort of stuff. Did I say a litre a minute? I meant a litre an hour. Sorry, big difference. As far as the toothpaste and the mouthwash goes, if you can keep good dental hygiene going, we've seen from the studies that if you live in another country, in another part of the world that doesn't fluoridate their water, that they've still got healthy teeth, they've got reduced dental cavities. I'm more concerned about the lead. That's my big concern. That's the wow factor for me, and obviously the iodine. Now, iodine is a natural chelator of fluoride. So what are we in Australia? What are we? Fluoride deficient. Where do we get fluoride? I'll start that again. We're not fluoride deficient. That is what we're not. We are iodine deficient. Where do we get iodine from? We get iodine from seafood, especially seaweed. Now, how many people sit down to a bowl of seaweed? No, not many. Kelp. No, don't. Oh, that looks really nice. Yeah, great. Seafood also contains iodine. As a general rule, we don't eat as much seafood. We're eating more, but we don't eat as much. So the government has had to bring in iodized salt. So iodine gets put into table salt. All of our cereals, our breads have got to be fortified now with iodine because as a nation, we are deficient in iodine. Are we deficient in iodine because of the fluoride in the water? I'm wondering. I'm really wondering. They're telling us that it's a lot of other things, but is it just that simple? Is it that simple? Vitamin C also negates the negative effects of fluoride, especially on cell mutations. And that's in animal studies. They've shown that in animal studies, vitamin C reverses or inhibits the mutation of that cell caused by fluoride. Are we vitamin C deficient? Yes, we are. Where do we get vitamin C from? Fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables. Once you pick a fruit or a vegetable, the vitamin C content starts to break down. So the apple that you're eating in summer that was picked last winter or last autumn has got minimal vitamin C in it, and the same with the orange. So sometimes we need to supplement with vitamin C as well, especially if we're stressed, because vitamin C is very important for our adrenal hormones, especially if our immune system is always compromised and we're getting a lot of infections, we've got an autoimmune disease, because that's the second highest concentration of vitamin C in the body is the immune system. The highest is the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands is the anti-stress gland. Alcohol, poor diet, junk food, fluoride, they all inhibit the utilisation of and the absorption of vitamin C. Fluoride exposure can increase the metabolic requirements for magnesium. So if you're low in magnesium, there's more chance of fluoride taking hold in your body. So magnesium is a bit of a protector from fluoride toxicity or detrimental effects of fluoride. Improving the detoxification and the functionality of your liver is also very important to help eradicate fluoride, because it's the liver that filters every drop of blood and it removes all the toxins from the blood. So if your liver's not happy, angry, irritable, frustrated, moody, annoyed, depressed, fatigue, headaches, nausea, dizzy, migraines, poor memory, poor concentration, poor focus, fatty foods cause nausea, you hate a windy day, skin's dry, you just flush at night, blood sugar problems. All those things can indicate poor functioning liver. So if that's the case, need to do a bit of liver detox, bit of liver cleansing, and that will help the body eradicate iodine, fluoride. But iodine, to me, is the number one nutritional supplement to take to negate the negative effects of the fluoride. So hopefully that's given you a greater understanding of fluoride and opened your eyes, because I know it's opened my eyes, and I'm quite surprised by what we've found, especially the letters I've mentioned previously, but also the Cochrane review. I mean, this is a massive review. This is the premier review on fluoride in our water and fluoridation of our water, and not one government's taken any credence to it. They've not done anything about it. It's pretty pathetic, actually. I really wonder if they do have our best health interests at heart. And as I say, these studies and results are on the website, vitalityandwellness.com.au, podcasts, and this podcast on fluoride, and just scroll down and you'll see the links. Click on the links, have a good read, make your own informed choices. Now, the legal side of things, anything I've mentioned today is purely educational and not meant to treat, cure, or diagnose a disease. Please consult your healthcare professional before taking any nutritional supplements. If you've got this far, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, please subscribe to this channel, Time for Health, and that way you can keep abreast of all the latest health topics that we talk about. Until next time, live life and laugh loud.